Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome to episode number 98 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. I'm your host, Catherine Eardley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group for product businesses. And if you are interested in finding out more about how you can grow sales in your business this year, then come along to my free talk. It's happening on the 29th of June at 11 a.m. And you can sign up for your free spot at resilientretailclub.com/grow 2022. That's grow 2022. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Vicky Simmons, who is the founder of Mean Mail, a greetings card company. I have known Vicky for several years now. In fact, when I rebranded my business to the Resilient Retail Club, which happened in October of 2020, Vicky was hugely helpful in offering support about branding. She's a real amazing eye for design, as you will know already if you've seen Mean Mail, if you're familiar with the company. Today, we are talking all about her journey, what it's been like starting and growing her business, and she shares some real gems about how she's managed to stay resilient even through the ups and downs of the last few years.
Hey,
thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I mean, I kind of feel obliged to say that, right? But it is really good to be doing this finally.
Do you want to start us off by telling everyone about you and your business?
So yeah, I'm Vicky. I'm the founder of Mean Mail. Mean Mail design their greetings cards with a sarcastic sense of humor. So instead of like, sorry, you're leaving, it's stay, you'll never make new friends. And instead of congrats on the new home, our cards say things like, I think I prefer your old place. My background is in branding and advertising. So I worked as an art director for a decade before starting Mean Mail. And like many industries, I think people just reach that tipping point of when they're playing their escape. And that's what Mean Mail was for me. Although I would also say never to going back. I think I'm one of those people who likes to be working on lots of things at the same time. And I know that's now called polywork. So
polywork.
There you go. But yeah, truth and honesty is totally at the heart of Mean Mail, and they're based on like the way I speak to my friends and family. I just come from like funny little conversations. And since launching with 16 cards in 2017, we're now stocked in over 200 stores internationally, from the Conran shop in London to Compendium Design Store in Australia. And along the way, I've worked on some really cool bespoke commissions for brands, including Nike London, Candy Kittens, Shiseido, and doing a pop-up for Vans in Covent Garden.
Wow.
That was a lot,
great.
Sorry.
No, that was brilliant. I've got to say, that's one of the best sort of brand stories I've heard. You just got that nailed. And I think also we should mention that they're sarcastic, but then they're also, the great juxtaposition is the sarcastic humour and the lovely pastel colours.
Yeah, the design process was really important to me, of making sure that there was a really nice juxtaposition between the sarcastic messages and the saccharine color palette. It's kind of like love hearts gone bad, I guess.
I'd never thought of it like that, but I love that. And I love that you have things like millennial pink yawn on a millennial pink bag and things like that. It was brilliant.
Yeah. Although I think I need to evolutionize that now, because millennial pink, geriatric millennials, we've moved past that now. We're into like the next generations, aren't we? So
lilac.
Yeah, and the green and chugginess and all those things. But yeah.
So you've done a lot of exciting collaborations, but I think one of the other things that I always think about when I think about Mean Mail is you have very topical cards. So, for example, you work with Instagram, right? On an Instagram live card.
Yeah, that was really random actually, because it was during the kind of heat of the pandemic. And every time we went on the app Instagram, I don't know about you, but it was just live, live, live along the top. And it was so, eye roll, another Instagram live. And I put that message, I think, on my stories or something. And someone from Instagram reached out to be like, oh my God, I love that. Can you make some cards for us with that on? So it was like a kind of private staff project. So I did end up doing that. And I said, hey, do you mind if I actually put these on my website as well? And they're like, no, go for it. So that came about really randomly. But yeah, with the topical cards, I always think if I'm feeling it, someone else will be feeling the same thing at the same time. So it's kind of universal shared emotions and thoughts.
So do you do them on a completely ad hoc basis, just if you're sitting there thinking about something? Because of course you've got your heat press, right? So you can make a bespoke card if the sort of moment, the thought takes you. So is it literally just if you're feeling something, you think to yourself, I'm going to put this on a card? I think you had one about banana. No one cares about your banana bread as well during the
pandemic. Yeah, that was like, because I was so bored about hearing people sourdough starter sharing recipes. And I've baked again, everyone. Great. So with my hot foil press, it isn't as easy as I can come up with it and it goes straight on there, because It's a traditional process. I come up with the lines, and then I actually have to send off the lines to be made onto magnesium plates.
Oh, yes.
And then when they come back, then I print them. So, yeah.
It's not quite the same as a letterpress, for example, where you can.
No, exactly. I can't just rearrange the characters in that sense. When something hits and I'm like, I share it on stories and I get a really good reaction from it, then I know, okay, let's take this further.
Amazing. So do you think that's part of it then, just people really recognizing something that it's almost like if you're saying out loud something that's in their head, is that the sort of power of it?
Yeah, definitely. If it's resonating and making a connection and making someone else laugh, or it makes me laugh, then it'll make someone else laugh. But also there is always that big jump between people saying they're like they love it and they want to buy it, and then actually going ahead and buying it. So it's always making sure that that's a kind of a dead cert winner in that sense.
Yes. That's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because people can say things on stories, say you have put it up on stories and everyone's like, oh my goodness, I love it. But then you actually have to, as I always say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's like you got to put it in front of them with a price tag on it and see if they actually do buy.
One thing I was going to say on the topical cards, it's like right now we're still living through the pandemic. There's a war going on. There's the cost of living crisis. There's energy bills are insane. Calling our government corrupt would be an understatement. And now we've got this monkeypox going on.
Yeah.
So it's like life isn't real. We're in this dystopian episode of Black Mirror. And if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So if the cards can kind of make you laugh, that will be a bonus.
On that point then, so when it comes to the topical, then presumably you have to be very careful that you're not picking something that it is light-hearted, like Instagram lives, banana bread, that they're not kind of life or death situations, right? So you're making sure that it's topical, but you also want it to be something funny and light. It's not like you're getting super political, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes I have got a little bit super political, but not. I've more borrowed cards from the main range. Like I've got a new card coming out that just says, when are you moving out? And I put it up when it was all kicking off with, Partygate last week.
Yeah.
And it got a really good reaction. But yeah, people say you shouldn't be too political. And I guess that is true as well. But yeah, I can't help but be sometimes because the situation is so frustrating.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, as you said, you're taking a card from the main range. It's not like you created a card that says, for example, there are people who sell necklaces that say "fuck Boris," for example.
Yeah. Actually, I love is it Dream On that they do their Buck Forest t-shirts? They are incredible. Yeah.
So the topical thing has definitely helped, and it helps with the buzz around the brand and everything else. But from what you've outlined, from 2017 when you started with 16 cards to now you've got over 200 stockists. So you've been running Mean Mail now for 5 years. What would you say, is there such a thing as one thing that helped you grow, or is it just a whole myriad of different factors?
Can I say two things that I feel that really helped me grow? So one of them is originality. I think that's been really important from the start, because if you're going to enter an oversaturated, declining market, you've got to do things differently. So making sure that the cards aren't like anything else that was out there before, like that came previously, I think has really helped in terms of people being like, oh, being interested in that, and help with the kind of press that we got in the early days. And then the second thing that's really helped me grow is Laura and Zoe, who both worked for me part-time since January 2021.
Yeah.
And I know like your first hires are always such a kind of a crucial thing. But I'd really reached a tipping point at that moment, because I'd come back off maternity leave and the business was just being so limited by it just being me. Mm-hmm. And they've just been absolutely amazing in the growth of the business.
Fantastic. So knowing when to hire at the right point.
Yeah. And the kind of the types of people you go for as well. I remember I once saw David Hyatt do a talk. I'm a really big fan of everything he does. He's done the Do lectures, and he originally founded Howie's and then Hyatt Denim. But I asked him in terms of like first hires, where in the skill set, what do you go for? And he said, go for enthusiasm and energy, because everything else can be taught. And I think that is so true. Like you want people who are kind of really good at lots of things, but also it's just them wanting to be open and willing to be like trying different things and not being like, I'm below that, because every day I'm on the floor packing orders, doing stock check. I'm not like being below any of the tasks that I'm doing. They're just part of the everyday running of the business. So having people on board that are happy to kind of get stuck in at every level is what you need.
I love that, because I think that's often one thing that people really struggle with when they're looking to hire. They're often unsure of the kind of people or the types of roles that they should have. And I completely agree with you, because I think that attitude is the one thing you can't manage into somebody. You can't manage a good attitude into somebody. You can manage lots of other things with someone that you've hired, but if they haven't got the right approach, if they're not excited, then it's very, very hard to bring that in.
Yeah, definitely. And also there's the other thing is obviously things go wrong along the way. I can't think of anything in particular that's happened with Zoe and Laura and stuff. But when mistakes happen, like it's not about pointing the finger and the blame. Like I remember that's a big thing from my advertising background, is if something kind of went wrong, there'd be this whole room of people pointing other fingers as to which department are we going to blame this kind of fuck up onto. When actually it's like, no, yep, this is fucked up. But it's okay. We're not saving lives here. People need to kind of get over themselves when it comes to that. And it's like, we can just get this resolved,
Yeah.
I've had some like really random things happen along the way. And if you're honest and you're just kind of like, I'm sorry, and you own it, it's so much more refreshing and easier to move forward than to kind of be all shouty and angry and pointing the finger.
Oh, I completely agree. And I'm laughing because that's exactly what used to happen in retail when I worked in corporate retail. It was the first things, it was like if something went wrong, like first things first, whose fault is it? And then it was almost like they put so much effort into working out whose fault it was. I just used to think, surely this effort would be better spent actually fixing the problem, rather than, okay, all right, we figured out who's to blame, now we can move on. And it was just such a waste of energy, and it was just part of the real toxic culture. But I think that's fantastic. Had you been managing teams in your previous role before you started running your business?
I had, but only towards the end. So I started Meemail, I was freelancing as an art director and a creative director. So I was looking after teams with that. But I once read a really good quote. I know it's bad to just be filled with like inspirational quotes, whatever. But it was like a great creative director should do none of the work but take all of the blame. And I always think about that, because so many creative directors, I think, or so many people in charge want every idea to like come from them. Yes. But it's actually way more important to inspire and empower your team to come up with the ideas, and then you help with the refining and the kind of narrowing down of stuff. And then, if stuff goes wrong, just owning it and looking after it, and not letting anyone feel like it's the end of the world, because it really isn't. It's just life.
Yeah, no, I think you're so right. And I think what really stuck out for me in managing a team was that somebody said, look, if you're the head of a team of 10, for example, if you work on yourself and make yourself 100% better, you're still only improving the whole team by a small percentage. Whereas if you focus on working with the team and everyone in the team becomes, say, 20% better, then overall your team performance is so much more powerful than if you just focus on yourself. And I completely agree. I think it's so important that as a team manager to play that role as the cheerleader, not the taskmaster. But it's really interesting to hear you say that, because there's two things I think that you've touched on that often we don't talk about enough on the small business journey. And number one is getting help, because I almost feel sometimes, I don't know if you agree with me, that sometimes it's like this slightly romanticized idea of a small business being run by one person, and it's all about like the personal brand, probably partly because of Instagram and, showing your face. So you sometimes get the impression that people are doing it all themselves. And also this idea about this polywork, which I think is a great description, because I think we also slightly romanticize the idea that everyone can be supported financially completely 100% from their business. And if you're not, then somehow that's less than doing different things. But the truth is that at times financially it just makes more sense to go with polywork, for example. And I think it's really good that you've talked about both of those things as the business has developed, because there's this slight, I think, over romanticization of entrepreneurship where it's like, here's me and I'm doing it all and I'm supporting myself entirely from my business. And if you're not, then somehow that's not good.
I completely agree with you. I think it's really important to just there's so much behind the scenes shame going on, and so much stuff that isn't really talked about, isn't talked about. Like, I've been on such a kind of a rocky journey throughout the whole thing, and people come up to me and say, oh, but it's gone so well. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I have been really great at promoting that as a front, but there is this kind of the nuances of what's going on in the background, and sometimes you don't know what to share, what's worth what you want to share, and what's an overshare. So it is a kind of a tricky road to navigate. But I think ultimately, if you can be really honest to yourself, you don't have to necessarily share that publicly, and working out what's best for you and your business, then you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just find it really sad when people say to me, oh, I think I might have to, do part-time work again or something like that. And they feel a sense of shame about it. And I just think there is no shame at all. I think that we should all just embrace there being different models and different times in your business where you're able to do different things, and definitely not to feel like it's all about you. And I think it's great to hear you say that your team is such an important part of your growth. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about sustainability, because you've been running Mean Mail for 5 years, and over that time we have seen a shift from a broader sense, from a broader industry sense. There's been a shift towards more awareness of things like single-use plastic. And I'd love to hear just a little bit about sustainability, what that means for the card industry in particular, and for your business in specific. What has that meant for you practically, this kind of move towards more sustainability? Is that something that you get feedback from, for example, your stockists? Are they looking for certain things?
I wouldn't say I've had a move towards sustainability, because I've been there from the start. Like, yeah. I've got this thing, if you're going to bring something into the world, you need to not be leaving it in a shittier way than it is already. And with sustainability and using like the right products, it's not a nice to have or a marketing tactic. It is compulsory. Yeah. So being transparent, making sure things are traceable and accountable as well is just super, super important from when you're starting out. Definitely with the greeting card industry, when I entered it, I saw it as super wasteful. Like, so biodegradable cellos and compostable cellos have always been more expensive since the start. And then it's been quite a journey, I guess, because now we've kind of evolved to having card clasps, and then lots of people are getting on board with being completely naked with the cards. And I actually think that is the kind of the best solution. And I'm actually really impressed with some of the supermarkets, how good they've been at embracing that. Yeah. It's really nice to see. But yeah, it's tricky because it depends on the kind of stockist. Like, I work with quite a lot of plant shops and florists, and they obviously want the cards to stay in a sleeve because it helps protect them when they're in the shop environment. And I guess it also depends.
A lot of moisture, presumably.
Yeah. And just like the grubbiness of like the dirt flicking about as well when they're like putting up all their plants. Yeah. I just think it is like getting the shift over. Like I actually I think it was it? Yeah. In 2020, I delivered a massive order to Conran. It came from my warehouse and it got lost in translation and it ended up being sent completely cello free. And Conran were like, can you come in and cello all these cards? So I had to go in to all their stores and go and cello them. But in terms of card damage, I think it was 2 and 500 that I ended up replacing. So it was such a good kind of, I was like, really, it would be great if you could stay completely cello free. It would be amazing rather than putting these on. But, I think it's just getting the industry around to it. I know some of the big retailers, when I entered the industry, they were still, if a card doesn't sell by the end of the season, it just gets pulped, cello and all, which is terrifyingly bad. I think that kind of practice has kind of been pushed out now, hopefully.
So are you seeing different retailers at different levels or different stages in their journey, as it were?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's I guess it's the kind of the scariness and the trust of it, of knowing that it's going to work out for them. I've always kind of said, I always encourage retailers, I would say it's about 50% at the moment who go completely naked versus the ones who go for like biodegradable cellos. And I just encourage them to try naked. And then if it's an issue, I'll send the cellos along later on, or I'm happy to kind of help them in that way. Or even if there were like damaged envelopes, I'd rather we push for that than using them.
Yeah. And then it's getting them comfortable with the fact that it can work and the shop soil is maybe less than they think.
Yeah, definitely. It is a learning curve together though. I actually, during 2020, I tried out card clasps. Oh dear. It was, you know what? Like it was a big learning moment for me, because at the beginning it worked really well. I went with a company who was recommended to me, and at first they worked out really great, and I'd done tests on the cards, and at that point my cards were a mixture of GF Smith paper and litho printed with the color, and it seemed to work out completely fine. But then actually what it doesn't account for is the kind of environment that they're being displayed in.
Right.
And a couple of months later I started getting, I got a message from a customer saying how disappointed they were that it marked the card. And in the end, I only had a handful. It was less than 5 customers that got in touch. But I ended up recalling all that stock and replacing the ones that were damaged.
Right.
And overall, like there was no kind of rhyme or reason, but it was around at least 20 to 30% of the card clasps that were failing.
Right.
And I think that's almost one of the industry's dirty little secrets, is that it was a kind of, it's not a very tested method of packaging the cards. And they have since changed the glue formula. So it's an admission of, we're all learning here. Sometimes there are things in the industry that are a bit greenwashing, but it's like every industry, it's like when a trainer company says that they're making their trainers from plastic collected from the ocean, and then it actually turns out it's never been in the ocean as plastic, but it could have ended up there, that kind of thing. There are just various elements of greenwashing. And so in that sense, I think we need to be mindful of when we try new things and careful with how they go. Because even with the cellos, biodegradable and compostable, the only way that those biodegrade and compost is if they're in the right conditions.
Right. Yes. Funnily enough, I was just talking to David Abramovich from Grind about their compostable coffee capsules, and he was saying the same thing about there's like home compostable, which is what they are now, but previously it was industrially compostable. So it's a question of people really understanding what the nuances are. And then with card clasps, which for anyone who's listening who's not familiar with them, is a little sticker basically that goes on the outside of the card to keep the envelope inside. It's an alternative to cello. Then it's great in theory, but if you're then producing wastage because some of those stickers are marking the cards, then it's
defeating the purpose.
Yes, yeah. No, it's a fascinating journey. And I like what you said from the get-go, that it's been all about, if you're going to do something, then it's got to be beneficial, which I think is the place that a lot of small businesses are starting from as well. It's very rare for me to talk to a small business that isn't building sustainability into what they're doing. But it's just really interesting to hear how it's almost like the whole industry has been finding its way over the last few years.
Yeah. And I think it is brilliant, like how it has been moving towards that. But yeah, there's a lot to be done. I think one thing that's interesting and worth looking into is B Corp status. And that's kind of a bit like fair trade is for foodstuffs, but it is for just businesses in general. And it's bigger in America than it is over here, but it's all about kind of building companies that are ethically sustainable and just good for people and the planet. It is expensive to register for, and there are many hoops to jump through. But I think if you can look to that as a business model and incorporate elements into your business, you don't necessarily have to register for it. You'd be doing a great job by just kind of seeing those kind of elements. Like, it's about giving a percentage to charity, time out for charity work, making sure that everyone's paid a fair wage. And yeah, it's just a better way of doing business. And I guess it's the way all business is leaning towards and will be eventually, but it's going to take time.
For sure. So I'd like to just finish up then by asking you, and this was your idea, by the way, I'd just like to say, I'm not going to take any credit because you were the one who suggested this, and I think it's fantastic. So obviously it's the Resilient Retail Game Plan, and the idea was, what are the moments where you've had to be resilient as a business owner? So you talked about a couple of things like, this incident with the cellos and the card clasps being a sort of big headache at the time when they're marking the cards. But would you say those are the biggest times that you've had to be resilient as a business owner, or are there other points in the business where you felt you really had to kind of dig into your own internal reserves of resilience to keep going?
Oh goodness, Catherine, how long have we got? I could do a whole episode on this. These resilient moments, I actually call them almost like my business traumas that I've been carrying around. And it's only recently I've kind of been decided to start unburdening my mental load of them. Because but on that note, actually, mental health and small business, I wish someone had told me at the beginning how hard it can be. Like, it is scary out there, and it is a really long, hard journey. Like, sometimes I'm like, I would swap that any day for a nice kind of full-time salaried role. But I guess my resilient moment started right at the beginning, even before I launched my business, with my trademark, because I decided to register it, having heard a horror story from a friend. I did it myself.
Yeah.
Long story short, one day a recorded delivery arrived on my mat, and it was like a 70-page kind of cease and desist. So when you register for a trademark, they go into this trademark manual, and then lawyers across the country who work for bigger corporates go through the manual to kind of check to see where they can, if there's any infringements, and where they can make money. I can't actually name who it is that came after me, but they're one of the biggest companies in the world. And their lawyers ultimately ended up trying to sit on my trademark and suffocate me out. They just thought by getting rid of me by inaction, it would work. And at first, I ended up getting advice from a lawyer who I'd met at an event, and I was writing my own defense. But then it ended up being, I need to get representation, because I did a bit of research and found out every other company that had come up against this company and represented themselves had lost and had to pay all the fees, which in this case I'd read about was around £5,000 at the time. But I ended up working with a great lawyer called Brand Smith, who were brilliant, a guy called Ben Polak. Long story short, the other company ended up firing their lawyers, getting new lawyers, and we did the deal, and it all worked out. But luckily much less than I thought it was going to cost, but it was still, couple of £1,000s.
It's a tough one at the beginning of your journey as well, when you're first trying to build that momentum, and then you've got that to deal with.
Yeah, it was scary, but it also made me go, right, I really need to do this. And then at that point, I'd invested all that kind of time and the emotional effort into it, and was like, I need to continue this. And it actually only got resolved about 2.5 years ago. So it was a long journey.
Wow.
And then I guess another massive moment I've always had to be resilient, and this has been constantly throughout my business, is dealing with copycats.
I wondered if you were going to say that, because I feel like that's been a recurring theme, right?
Yeah, it happened within the first few months of me starting, and that was actually pointed out to me by a complete stranger, this illustrator from Australia randomly. She was telling me that she was like, oh, I think you need to check this out. And it was a multi-million-pound company in the States. And I was like, oh, wow. They'd done it in quite a clever way, though, and it made me realize that I was onto a really good idea. I could just see how my product had completely informed their new collection.
Yeah.
And then, it's happened multiple times since. And it never gets any easier. I mean, stockists and customers have been really good at brand protection for me. And in fact, almost a little too overzealous sometimes. Like I can't count the amount of times certain brand, like other cards have been flagged up to me and I say, yeah, I'm aware of this. I really appreciate you pointing it out. But I think it is important. Like I do it for others too. Every time I see something that makes me feel uncomfortable for somebody else's brand, I will kind of point it out in a polite way, not to the copycat, but to the original brand saying, I don't know if you're aware about this. It's just rife in so many industries. I mean, the fashion industry is worse, right?
Yeah, it's a constant, it's just cyclical, isn't it? And so I guess my question to you then is that, I mean, these are all fairly horrifying things that you've had to deal with. So how do you feel like, where has it come from, I guess, the resilience? Almost when they tried to squash your trademark, did it just almost like put the fire in your belly that like, this has got to work now?
Yeah, totally. Like that, with that, it was like, I know I'm onto, if they're coming after me, I must be onto something good with the name of the company. Because it took me ages I really struggled for ages to name the company. It was called something completely different at first. So yeah. And then with the copycats, like I know people say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. It is and it isn't. But yeah, the energy it takes to be dealing with that is absolutely exhausting. So I just try not to think about it. Like I had a flurry at the beginning of this year where I had like 3 or 4 come out in a matter of 2 months.
Wow.
And I still actually haven't even got around to kind of processing and dealing with that. One of them actually, someone walked up to me at, when I was exhibiting at Top Drawer and went, "Oh God, I feel really bad. I think I've copied your designs." And I was like, "Oh," and they're friends. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And when they showed me it, my heart sank. It was really hard to deal with. Yeah. But I mean, I guess they know they're in the wrong, though, if they're going to come up to me and say that. But
what do they expect you to say to that? Oh, that's okay. Or do they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They just say cease and desist.
I don't know. I know so many people go through the same thing that I've gone through as well. And you know what? There's not enough resources out there to help people deal with it. Like people do start pointing you in the direction of lawyers and stuff and IP lawyers, but sometimes they can actually be quite unsympathetic to the whole situation. And even if there isn't a kind of necessarily a direct legal challenge you can do, which obviously would cost loads of money anyway, there are other ways of trying to remedy it. But yeah, so I'm actually in the process of creating an online course about that, of trying to help people to kind of resolve these issues amicably rather than,
Oh, that's fantastic. So that is a course that you're putting together for small business owners that have had IP challenges or copycats.
Yeah. And I actually almost want to do it from both angles of, if you've actually been a copycat, like how to deal with the situation, because I think it's important to address those issues as well. But yeah, there's so much to be said about that.
I feel like we could keep going all day, but to wrap things up, let's hear a little bit more about the course and where people can find out more about Mean Mail.
So I've got my website, which is meanmail.co. I'll be sharing the course on there and on the newsletter.
Is it out now or is it coming out soon?
It will be coming out soon. I don't have an official launch date for it yet, but I will always be keeping people informed on the newsletter, and I'll share on Instagram, but no one's going to see that, right? Because it doesn't work. But yeah, and then I've got some new cards launching later this month. And I want to do a in-person hot foil course at some point too. Ooh. So yeah, just stay tuned, check out the website and stay on the mailing list.
Can you tell us anything about the new cards? Any hints?
Any hints? Oh, so my favorite one out of the new cards just says "You've peaked." And that's a birthday card, I guess, but it could be for like you could use it for many other occasions as well. And I brought out a completely new type of design, which has been a response to like one of my stockists wanting cards that can kind of cater for other things, so even more ambiguous. But I'll leave it at that. But yeah,
graduation, that would be a harsh graduation card.
yeah.
Or wedding. Because I got married super young. I got married at 23, and I always used to find it really objectionable when people would say, "Oh, when you get married, it's the happiest day of your life." And I was like, "Oh, that's a long, slow decline then, really, isn't it?"
Yeah. I've got an anniversary card that's just like, "Oh yeah, at least I remembered, and it could be worse." So
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I'd love for you to come over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club and say hi. Let me know what you took away from today's episode, and why not tell me about your moments of resilience. I am looking to feature some more product businesses talking about how they've been resilient in the next few weeks. So if that's you and you've got a story you'd like to share, then drop me a note. I'd love to hear from you. Of course, if you have a moment to rate and review the podcast, that would make all the difference in the world to me. You can rate and review in iTunes, or you can rate the podcast in the Spotify app. And of course, if you hit subscribe or follow, you'll be the first to know about each new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions, or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.